With Final Fantasy XVI's demo released, we've seen an insane spike in interest in this game. 2 polls were recently done asking fans to estimate the approximate meta score of Final Fantasy XVI on the reviews. One done before the demo was released and one after. The difference in expectation is notable. Now that everybody has their hands on one of the most successful demo campaigns I've ever seen, people have been very opinionated about this game. In fact, they've started to question what it actually means to be a Final Fantasy game. Let's talk about the game, the hype, and what it means to be a Final Fantasy. I'm Solace, this is Solace and Dread. We produce reaction videos as well as analytical content, primarily focused on Square Enix, Nintendo, and Capcom publications. Let's talk about the influencers. If you look at people who weren't necessarily charmed into saying good things about the game, people like Charlie, aka Moist Critical, who literally labeled the game as the best demo he has ever played in his life. This man is pretty negative about most things. For him to give his blessing on the game is pretty crazy. Then you got another creator who is also just as opinionated as Charlie, very similar in size, and that would be Asmongold. This would be another example of somebody absolutely swooning in love with this demo. Both of these men have indicated that this is likely to be the Game of the Year contender. And of course there's Maximilian Dude, but we all know that Maximilian Dude was not only paid to attend the event, he's also a regular Final Fantasy fanboy. But outside of these three, there have been no shortage of content creators who have been bouncing off the walls talking about this demo. This is a really good thing for Final Fantasy, especially for Square Enix, who's had quite a few misses over the past couple of years. Sure, there have been talks about its graphical fidelity. Sure, there have been conversations about the fact that it can't maintain a 60 frames per second as a constant. But the general community has been pretty impressed with what they played. Still, there's a lot of opinions out there from people stating that Final Fantasy XVI does not feel like a Final Fantasy. I'm a centrist at heart, and I try my best to understand where everyone's coming from. We're going to dive into some of the aspects of Final Fantasy XVI that definitely feel new to the franchise, and we're going to talk about why or why not these kinds of opinions hold weight. So let's get the obvious out of the way. A medieval setting in a dark fantasy type, the game is packed with summons, a ton of different characters, and of course an engaging story. Having a dog assist to the main party is actually something that dates back to even Final Fantasy VI. Those scream Final Fantasy all day. I really don't think that anybody's disputing any of these. And even if they were, well, I'm not really here to talk about that because it doesn't make any sense. What I can agree on are 2 things: the level of gore and blood, as well as the combat. The gore and blood. Final Fantasy I is vastly different from even Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy XIII. Over the years, the themes have certainly gotten a lot more mature. When you consider the age of this fan base, most of the fans of Final Fantasy are certainly over the age of 18. Many members of this fan base have grown up with this game over their entire life. We're talking about a 37-year-old franchise. Each iteration of Final Fantasy has matured or grown in some way, for the most part. At some point, someone made a decision that took the franchise well past the boundaries of its previous iterations. If you look at what Final Fantasy has been for the past few decades, you shouldn't be surprised moving from Final Fantasy VII and its darker themes to seeing where we are now. Admittedly, seeing a graphic depiction of throats being cut in Final Fantasy XVI's prologue was a bit jarring, or a decapitated character whose head lands bloodied in front of their child's face. This kind of violence may have been implied, but it's never been so graphically displayed before, and I cannot deny that it never has reached this level before. Final Fantasy continues to innovate. It's not going to be the same that it was on its previous iteration. I'm certainly not a child anymore. I want to see Final Fantasy cater to me as an adult, and there is plenty of still cute sides of the property. I don't really see the benefit in complaining about the franchise not doing the same thing that it has done 20 plus times already. I want to see them break new boundaries, and I think it's fair to say that the majority of the fandom does. Now let's talk about the combat. Now this is one part that I have to concede. Sure, I can say it. The combat doesn't feel like Final Fantasy. That's a good thing. I have played Final Fantasies for most of my life. Of the 16 mainline titles, I have played all but 4 of them, including the direct sequels and various spin-offs. A lot of that combat has stayed the same. I think it was most prominent when I looked at the bombing run of Final Fantasy VII in the remake and then compared it to the bombing run mission of the original game. I think that with the kind of combat that we have now, this is a proper retelling of what the characters went through. And the combat, as iconic and long-standing as it is, certainly wasn't indicative to what the storyteller wanted. I think when you consider the raw strength of some of these characters in Final Fantasy, that this kind of combat is much closer to what it would actually be like. I feel like they're breaking away from turn-based more and more because that's what modern gamers want. If they continue to make the exact same game over and over again, this franchise will die. It really blows my mind that people are complaining and saying that this isn't a Final Fantasy and then asking for the old stuff when every Final Fantasy, for the most part, is available to play on modern consoles. If you want the old stuff, why not play the old stuff? I think it's not fair to expect these creators, who are artists, to limit their arts specifically to your tastes. I think that the artists should be free to express themselves and try new things. When Final Fantasy XIII first came out, that paradigm system had never been seen before in Final Fantasy. I remember very vividly that people were saying then that this is not a Final Fantasy, and it very clearly was. Each iteration of Final Fantasy's combat in the teens has strayed further and further away from its original formula, and I honestly cannot applaud the series for doing that enough. Free action combat, to me, sets this game apart in a positive way from the rest of the franchise. Final Fantasy XV personally is my favorite, despite how broken it is, and I think that this game will answer to my tastes and sensibilities in the same manner that Final Fantasy XV did. And even though the combat doesn't feel like Final Fantasy as we previously knew it, it's hard to deny that it's Final Fantasy when all of the spells are labeled Final Fantasy spells and you're using the abilities of the icons who have been recurring characters for the better part of 3 decades. And of course, it's labeled Final Fantasy on the fucking box. They changed a core component and they'd modernized it. So really, if you happen to watch this hoping that I would somewhere along the line agree with you, I can't. It's as much a Final Fantasy as any of your favorite titles. I truly hope that the fans of the franchise can at least try the game, find some level of enjoyment in this product. I really think it's there to be had. And if not, well, there's the Pixel remasters, Final Fantasy VII, 8, and 9's remaster, Final Fantasy X has been ported to modern consoles, Final Fantasy XII has been ported to modern consoles, Final Fantasy XIII has been ported to modern consoles, and you can play literally any of those on modern hardware. And you can continue to play the games that you love. But it just seems like when everybody's happy about a product, there just has to be contrarians out there that just want to rain shit on everybody's parade. I don't understand it, I never will, but this is my message to you. Grow up. Not everything is for you. If you can't find the enjoyment, go find enjoyment somewhere else. That's it from me. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon, and long live the Turtle Kingdom.